I'm very pleased to be here once again, and maybe to try to set up some new collaborative works with our friends from Brazil. And I just like to mention I was very impressed by the previous talk, because it might show when you have a very good phenotype of the disease, we might find some very interesting things with the strong power of the genetics. And maybe in contrast of what we were thinking before, maybe some phenotype of the disease might be due to the single gene mutation. We don't know, and it will be the case. It will be very interesting. And I remember the story of, maybe you know, Jean-Laurent Casanova, which claimed 20 years ago that every infectious disease is due to one mutation. And in fact, he found 10 single genes associated to tuberculosis, to candidosis, and so on. So I think maybe you are at the beginning to find something very exciting, because you have a very good phenotype and very good work. And we can see also with a very small amount of money and with a good clinics. I mean, but it's not like we see big studies in the US with 1,000 patients and genomes and so on. They don't find anything. Maybe with only 5 pairs, you may find a good gene. Hopefully it will be true. So what I would like to show you today is what we have done from the last maybe 15 years in my lab, starting from basic science and try to move to clinical application and treatment of patients with some hematological malignancies and benign disease. And today I will show you one of example, start from the regulation of erythropoiesis, which leads, I hope, to the treatment and improvement of patients with beta thalassemia. So as you know, erythropoiesis is a very complex process, and we do make 10 to the 6 red cells per day. So it is a massive proliferative system. And if you do understand the system, you may understand a lot of pathological and physical process, including, for example, how cancer cells are proliferating, because cancer cells proliferate far less than the erythroblast, which produce like 10 to the 6 red cells per second, which is a lot. So as you know, the erythropoiesis starts in the bone marrow from the stem cells here, and upon the expression of a master gene, which we call GATA1, which is a transcriptional factor, which leads to the transcription of erythroid genes, this cell will follow some different steps of maturations to give rise to the mature red cells. We lost their nuclei, which are specific cells with no nuclei. And we know we need a specific regulation of erythropoiesis, because too much red cells is bad and too low it's bad also. And mainly this regulation occurs in the bone marrow because of the synthesis of cytokines. And we know, like, for example, cytokines like SCF is critical for the first step of maturation and proliferation of red cells. And in fact, stem cells induce the proliferation of these erythroid progenitors, stop their differentiation or to allow the expansion of these cells. And then erythropoietin, which is a master cytokine for regulation of erythropoiesis, blocks the apoptosis of red cells and allow the differentiation, which starts because of the GATA1 transcriptional master gene. So these two cytokines are very critical to regulate erythropoiesis. And what we know today, if you remove EPO, you will induce the apoptosis of these late mature erythroid progenitors. And the second level of regulation occurs also in the bone marrow, because we know that this mature erythroid progenitor express FAS, which is a death receptor, but also FAS ligand, which is also the ligand of this receptor. And upon interaction between FAS and FAS ligand, you will induce apoptosis. But fortunately, EPO, if it is high enough, can block this apoptosis induced by this interaction. So you have a fine tuning between the EPO level and the FAS ligand, which depends on the number of red cells which are in the bone marrow. And in fact, we know that in the bone marrow, the regulation of erythropoiesis occurs is what we call the erythroid island, which has been published in the 50s. And in this erythroid island, we have a macrophage here, which allows the cell to take up the iron that they do need to differentiate. And you have this expression of FAS ligand. And upon the interaction within the mature red cells and the immature red cells, you may induce the caspase activation. And caspase are enzymes which kill the cells, but in red cells, what they do particularly they induce the cleavage of the master gene of erythroid differentiation, which is GATA1. So you can see we have a very fine tuning of regulation between the number of cells here which do express Fas ligand, which induce the Caspase activation, but EPO blocks that. And at one time, you have an equilibrium between the apoptosis or maturation arrest because of the GATA1 cleavage, but also if you have more EPO, you can induce the differentiation and the survival of these cells. And by this mechanism, we have a very fine tuning of red cells we do produce every day, depending on the number of red cells in the bone marrow and the EPO level in periphery. So we can conclude from this preliminary result that Caspase are the critical protein and system which regulate the number of red cells we do produce by inducing apoptosis and to do not too much red cells. But what we found in our laboratory, it was that when you look at the terminal maturation of red cells, you can see the cells express some very typical features, like you see the nuclei is condensing and the chromatin also, which leads to the expulsion of the nuclei to give rise to the mature red cells here. And all of this process, when you look at them, they look typically at what we do observe when cells undergo apoptosis, meaning the condensation of the nuclei, the condensation of the chromatin. And this one we have shown is due also to the Caspase activation. And I remind you that Caspase are critical for killing the cells. But here we have shown that they are also critical for the maturation of red cells because they do cleave some protein like ROC1, lamin B, and acinus, which are responsible when they are cleaved of the nucleus condensation and chromatin condensation, allowing these cells to expulse their nuclei to give rise to the mature red cells. But during differentiation, which is very interesting, the GATA1 factor, the master gene of differentiation, is not cleaved in contrast to what we do observe during apoptosis. So we have made a lot of hypotheses and we came to the idea that maybe some proteins might protect specifically GATA1 from the cleavage by the Caspase, going as a chaperone, I should say, to protect GATA1 from the cleavage. In fact, it was the case, and we found that during erythroid differentiation, some chaperone, like HSP70, which is usually induced by the heat shock, allowing the cells which have some protein which are denatured by the heat shock, to protect this protein to not be degraded by the proteasome. So in fact, we found that HSP70, one of the heat shock proteins, is constitutively expressed during erythroid maturation and is in the nucleus. And you can see here, at the time of the Caspase activation, HSP70, which is in the cytosol of the cells, go to the nuclei. And at this level, you can see here there's a co-localization between GATA1 and HSP70. And we have shown that in vitro, when you incubated GATA1 with a Caspase, you can see here a degradation of the protein. But if you add HSP70 in the co-culture, you can see here that you reverse this phenotype and HSP70 protect GATA1 from the cleavage by the Caspase-free in vitro. So then we show that when we do remove EPO here, you can see that HSP70 disappear from the nucleus, and as a result, GATA1 is cleaved, and the cell will die by apoptosis, and the maturation could not occur anymore. But if we add nuclear export inhibitors, you can see HSP70 remain in the nucleus, whereas we remove EPO, and as a consequence, GATA1 is still expressed in the cells so they can survive and maturate. So here we have demonstrated that HSP70 is the protein which is able to protect GATA1 from the cleavage by the Caspase during erythroid differentiation. So we came with this model in which during erythroid differentiation you have HSP70 which is expressed in the cytosol, and while Caspase-free is activated to go to cleave some target, to protect GATA1 to be cleaved by the Caspase, HSP70 go from the cytosol to the nucleus, and as a result, GATA1 is protected from the cleavage, and the cell could enter to terminal erythroid differentiation. But if you remove EPO, HSP70 is going from the nucleus to the cytosol, and as a result, GATA1 is cleaved by Caspase-free, and the cell will die by apoptosis, and they could not finish their maturation. So here, we could show that finally that in fact the the fine-tuning of erythroid regulation depends on the localization of HSP70. If HSP70 go in the nucleus, the cell will undergo maturation. If HSP70 go to the cytosol, the cells will undergo apoptosis. So just by the migration of one protein from the nucleus to the cytosol, we can determine the fate of the erythroblast between differentiation, maturation, and apoptosis. So to understand this regulation, we came back to what is the mechanism by which proteins can go from the cytosol and to the nucleus. And you can see here that normally the cells to have some protein to go to the nucleus, they go to some nuclear pore here, and they need some transport protein which is called importin. And this importin binds to the protein that you want to import in the nucleus, and depending on the concentration of this protein, they need some energy, which came from here a GTPase, which gives some energy to this importin, and this protein is imported to the nucleus. But also, this protein can be exported by some other protein, which we call exportin, and also they need some energy, and in the same way as to import, they get this energy from the GTPase protein, like around GTP. So it's a very complex process. So what we have demonstrated is that, in fact, one protein, his name is Ikeshi, and Ikeshi has been described in cells which undergo heat shock. And in this case, when you have a heat shock, you induce the expression of this protein, which allow HSP70 to go into the nucleus. And what we didn't find, in fact, is that in erythroid differentiation, Ikeshi is constitutively expressed during erythroid differentiation because GATA1 binds to its promoter. So the master gene of erythroid differentiation induces this protein, allowing HSP70 to go into the nucleus in the constitutive manner. And we can see here the expression at the mRNA level, here at the protein level, that Ikeshi is constitutively expression. So because of its constitutively expression, we didn't think that Ikeshi was the gene which regulates the import and the export of HSP70, but allows the constitutive import of HSP in the nucleus. But in contrast, we looked at what makes HSP70 go outside the nucleus, and we looked at different exportin. And we found that, in fact, XPO1, which is expressed during erythroid differentiation, lost its expression at the end of erythroid differentiation when HSP70 remained in the nucleus. So we made the hypothesis that XPO1 might be the exportin of HSP70 because its expression is lost when HSP70 remains in the nucleus. And in fact, it is the case. We can see here by a dual-link experiment that HSP70 interact specifically with XPO1, and here by octet experiment, we can see here the affinity of XPO1 HSP70 is quite high. So we came with this model in which during erythroid differentiation, HSP70 go into the nucleus because of Ikeshi expression, but go outside the nucleus because of XPO1 expression. XPO1 might be regulated during erythroid differentiation to allow HSP70 to remain in the nucleus. So this model, if it is true, we may find some pathological conditions in which there is a deregulation of this complex process which regulates the fate of erythroid cells. So we came to beta thalassemia. And as you know, beta thalassemia is characterized by the lack of beta chain synthesis, and as a result, you have this balance between the alpha chain, which are free in the cytosol, and the beta chains, and as a result, you have some aggregate of alpha chains, which induce the presence of hemichrome, which may lead to apoptosis of the cells in which you have a lot of alpha chains. So we know that now the phenotype of beta thalassemia depends not only on the level of beta chain synthesis, but also on the level of alpha chains. The patient with beta thalassemia plus alpha thalassemia have a phenotype which is milder than the patient with a normal synthesis of alpha chains. And in contrast, the patients with high alpha level synthesis have a very profound phenotype. So as a result of this excess of alpha chains, we know there is a disturbance of the proliferation, differentiation, and apoptosis of erythroid progenitors, which is very peculiar because in thalassemia, you have an increase of the early phase of erythroid differentiation with an increasement of the proliferation of early erythroblasts. And in some cases, this progenitor expansion is like tumors, like a tumor. And you see some patients with extra hematopoietic tumors. You can see here with a lot of erythroid cells, which looks at a tumor, and sometimes it can induce some medullary compression in this patient with paraparesis or eventually paraplegia of patients. So it might be sometimes very dangerous, like tumors. And in addition, we know that this expansion here occurs at the level of the basophil and the polychromatophil erythroblast. And also we know this ineffective erythropoiesis is associated to an increase and acceleration of the end stage of erythroid differentiation. So here you have an excess of proliferation, and here you have an excess of erythroid differentiation. But at the end of maturation, between the polychromatophilic stage and the acidophilic stage, here you have a maturation arrest and apoptosis of these cells. And to try to explain the mechanism by which this apoptosis occurs, we found first that it is at the same time when you have a lot of aggregates of alpha chains in the cells, you have a more apoptosis at this level. And we made the hypothesis that during erythroid differentiation in thalassemia, because of this excess of alpha chains here, HSP70, instead to go to the nucleus, is going to chaperone this excess of alpha chains, because the role of HSP70 in normal condition is to chaperone some proteins which are abnormal in aggregations or abnormal conformations. So if GATA1 HSP70 is sequestrated in the cytosol because of the excess of alpha chains, HSP70 won't go anymore in the nucleus, and as a result, caspase-3 will cleave GATA1 and the cells will die by apoptosis. So to test this hypothesis, we came back to the bone marrow of patients with thalassemia. You can see here in normal bone marrow, you have both the expression of HSP70 in the nucleus and GATA1 is expressed. Whereas in thalassemia, you can see here, you have a lot of HSP70 which is outside the nucleus, and you have no expression of GATA1. And in cell cultures, we did the same kind of experiment, and you can see how during erythroid differentiation in thalassemia, you have an excess of alpha globin, which present as aggregate when you compared to the normal erythroid differentiation with the normal control. And you can see here that HSP70 is not anymore in the nucleus and co-aggregate with the excess of alpha chains. And as a result, GATA1 is not expressed anymore, so the cell could not differentiate further. So what we did, we transduced an HSP70 mutant which remains localized in the nucleus. And we can see here, when you have this mutant in thalassemia, you can see HSP70 remain in the nucleus and GATA1 is still expressed. And as a result, you see an increase of erythroid differentiation. And interestingly, because of the GATA1 expression is higher, we can see that the cells which are transduced by this mutant are able to synthesize fetal hemoglobin. So we can produce some red cells with fetal hemoglobin, even in patients with major beta thalassemia, when we do protect GATA1 from the cleavage of caspase-3 by inducing HSP70 localization in the nucleus. So to summarize here, we can see that during thalassemia ineffective erythropoiesis, at the end here, because of the interaction between HSP70 and alpha globin, you have an apoptosis of this red cell. So based on this result, we can say that we can have a new idea to treat ineffective erythropoiesis in thalassemia. The first one, which is some kind of sample, is we have shown that by in silico modeling that alpha globin fit perfectly in the pocket in HSP70. So if we can disturb this interaction between alpha globin and HSP70, we may be able to restore the expression of HSP70 in the nucleus and allow the cell to differentiate because GATA1 will be protected from the cleavage. Another possibility is to induce the expression of the cognate chaperone of the alpha chain, which is called HSP. And if we can deregulate the expression of these proteins and increase this level of expression, we may decrease the level of alpha chains which are free, allowing HSP70 to go back to the nucleus to allow the erythroid terminal differentiation. And the third pathway might be to use some inhibitor of exportin, and particularly XPO1. And in this case, we will allow the HSP70, which go constitutively in the nucleus, to don't go outside and to protect GATA1, even if you have an excess of alpha chains in the cytosol. And interestingly, there is a drug which is called KPT, which is developed in cancer therapy to block the export of P53 from the nucleus in tumoral cells. But by this mechanism, the cells may die by apoptosis if P53 is not mutated. So we use this compound, which is now used in phase 2 study, which is not toxic for hematopoiesis and has not too much toxicity outside the hematopoietic system, so which is possible to use in the future, probably in patients with thalassemia. So when we did treat this cell with XPO1 inhibitor, you can see here that we restore HSP70 in the nucleus in the dose-dependent manner in cells with thalassemia using the MNIStream technology here. And you can see in the same time GATA1 expression is increased. And as a result, you see you have an increase of maturation of red cells here and a decrease of apoptosis. So we do believe that by blocking the export of HSP70, we may restore end-stage erythroid differentiation in thalassemia, and probably we may use these drugs to help patients with beta thalassemia. So to conclude this first part of my talk, if I have time, I should say that understanding the molecular mechanism by which erythroid cells are made allow to make a good hypothesis on disease with ineffective erythropoiesis. And we do think that HSP70 is a critical protein because its expression and localization may induce some ineffective erythropoiesis. So probably there is some other disease, and we have a lot of examples showing that HSP70 is not expressed or not localized in the good place in some disease, inducing ineffective erythropoiesis, and XPO1 may be a new target to treat this patient with this ineffective erythropoiesis. And more interestingly, we know that a lot of disease, including, for example, Alzheimer's disease, we have an excess of aggregate of proteins, beta amyloid proteins in the neuronal cells, they may kill these cells. And interestingly, HSP70 is expressed in these cells and not localized in the nuclei, and maybe we can use this model to target, for example, XPO1 in neuronal cells to see if we can stop the apoptosis of neuronal cells. So to go to another aspect of, if I have time, of erythroid ineffective erythropoiesis, as I said before, at the beginning of erythroid differentiation, you have an expansion of proerythroblast and basophil at this stage, and like real tumoral cells. And why we have this expansion is because we know because of the anemia in periphery, EPO level goes up, and as a result, you induce high signaling from the EPO receptor, which induce some signaling like JAK2, which allows the proliferation of the cell. But as I said before, fast ligand should kill these cells, but it's not the case in thalassemia because you see some tumors. And why it is not the case? Because we have found that fast ligand is not expressed in erythroid cells from beta thalassemia, allowing the proliferation of this early progenitor. And you can see here that we show that fast ligand is significantly decreased when you compare to normal erythroblast, and same thing for the fast. So the system fast ligand is reduced in thalassemia, which explains the expansion of this early erythroid progenitor. So the question why in thalassemia fast ligand are downregulated. So to make also a long story short, we came to the hypothesis that some member of the TGF-beta family might regulate fast ligand expression, and we came to GDF11, which is a new member of the TGF-beta member family, and we have shown that GDF11 is produced by erythroid cells in thalassemia, probably as a result of the high reactive oxygen species. You can see here in the serum of mice with beta thalassemia, and when we look by confocal analysis, we showed that it is the erythroblasts themselves that produced highly GDF11. And coming back to patients, we could see that GDF11 in patients with thalassemia is highly expressed, and we found also the expression was from erythroblasts of the patient. And so in a mice model of beta thalassemia, we came to the idea to block GDF11 specifically with an antibody against GDF11. What we did find, in fact, when we did block GDF11, we did re-increase the expression of Fas ligand, which is very interesting in this case to block the expansion of erythroid cells, and this expression of Fas ligand result in an increase of apoptosis, as I said here, by the annexin 5 positive cells. So we came back to try to develop drugs which may block GDF11 in patients, and we are fortunate to see that Celgene were developing a trap, which is some kind of receptor mimic protein, which bind activin to block the metastasis in bone cancer. But in fact, we found that this trap receptor block also GDF11 and GDF8, which are similar to activin to bind to the same receptor. So when we use this trap, which is used in clinical setting, what we did find in thalassemic mice, we see that an increase of the hemoglobin level in mice with thalassemia. And interesting, when you look at the cytological features of thalassemic mice, you can see upon treatment, these features are decreased, and some red cells are totally normal, which is not the case in the wild type, in the mice which is not treated by RAP11. And you can see here that in this model, we show that in the spleen of these mice, we have an high expression of GDF11, which was expected, but upon treatment, you can see a disappearance of GDF11 expression, which is very interesting. And as expected too, from the preliminary result with antibody against GDF11, you see we reinduce the expression of Fas ligand in basophilic erythroid cells, which induce some apoptosis of these cells. As a result, here also you can see when you look at the maturation of red cells, we can restore some maturation when we do express Fas ligand on these cells. So, as I show you, by blocking GDF11, we reinduce Fas ligand, which may reduce the ineffective erythropoiesis in this proliferative part. But we see also an increase of the hemoglobin in the periphery. So here we have a paradox in which, by inducing the killing of cells, we increase the hemoglobin level, which is something that we do not teach to the student, because we know to increase hemoglobin, we need to increase the reticulocyte number, and here we see a decrease of the reticulocyte number, but an increase of hemoglobin. So how to explain this paradox? So what we did find, in fact, it's because of the blockade of GDF11, we reduce the number of cells with aggregates here, and you can see, and we reduce also the generation of reactive oxygen species in these cells. You can see here where they are treated by GDF11. So we can come to the hypothesis that, and you know that in thalassemic patients, when you look at the fetal hemoglobin synthesis in the erythroid progenitor in the bone marrow, as you can see here by amnistream, it's very heterogeneous. Some cells do express highly fetal hemoglobin, and these cells are able to give rise to mature red cells with long life. But here, in contrast, you have cells with low fetal hemoglobin, and because these cells have a high level of alpha chains, they will have a lot of aggregates, which induce the expression of GDF11 expansion, and at the end of the maturation, cell death. So this one will die in the bone marrow, but will expand. So what happens when we treat these mice with anti-GDF antibody? But we, instead to have here the expansion of these cells with a lot of aggregate, will die in periphery with a low level of fetal hemoglobin. We kill particularly the cells with a high level of alpha chains, so the one with a low level of fetal hemoglobin. But by killing these cells, we reduce the proliferation of the erythroid cells in the bone marrow, the bad cells, I should say, but the good cells with fetal hemoglobin can expand and give rise to mature red cells with fetal hemoglobin with a long half-life. So we do increase the hemoglobin level by decreasing the production of bad red cells. So based on this result, we started a phase 1/2 study in patients with thalassemia. And just to summarize what you can see here, by increasing the dose, we could increase in 85% of the cases the level of hemoglobin in patients with non-transfusion thalassemia, and sometimes here 70% by 2 grams we could increase the level of hemoglobin, which allows this patient to have a better quality of life. And interestingly, we see a reduction of the iron overload because we did reduce the ineffective erythropoiesis. So we do expect by this treatment to stop the process of iron overload, which kills the patient at the end of the day, and also to improve their quality of life because we do increase the hemoglobin level. And in patients with transfusion-dependent beta thalassemia, you can see here, we could reduce by 60% the level of transfusion that this patient do need. So by this way, we will reduce also the iron overload due to the transfusion in this patient, and probably will increase the half-life of these patients. And interestingly, you can see at the clinical level, the cytological features are improved in these patients. And more interestingly, you can see here is this patient with a long past history of leg ulcers, which is classical in patients with beta thalassemia, particularly in the one with non-transfusion dependent beta thalassemia. You can see after 6 weeks of treatment, whereas the hemoglobin level was not totally corrected, you can see the ulcer disappear, which push us to make the hypothesis that in beta thalassemia, as you know, besides the anemia, the patients who are transfusion dependent may die of iron overload because you transfuse them regularly. But the patient with non-transfusion dependent erythropoiesis, you know, this patient have iron overload because of the synthesis of erythroferron, for example, which repress hepcidin by the liver. But also you have a lot of complications, inducing, for example, extramedullary hematopoietic pseudotumor, but also leg ulcer and cardiac and pulmonary problem. And probably, I do believe that this problem are due to the high level of GDF11 expression, which is a TGF beta member family, which may induce all of these complications. So if you do block GDF11, you may restore a normal quality of life and decrease this complication. So just to finish, in sickle cell disease, we have similar phenotype with a lot of complications. Some are due to I should say, thrombosis, but some are not explained fully today. And when we look at the patient with sickle cell disease, you can see here there is also an increase of GDF11 expression, and same thing in the mice with TGF with beta sickle cell disease model. So I do believe that in some instance, in sickle cell disease, we know also there is an ineffective erythropoiesis, which may induce also the high level of GDF11 expression, which may participate to the complication we do see in these patients. So to conclude, GDF11 is a new key player of ineffective erythropoiesis, and blocking these molecules improve ineffective erythropoiesis in beta thalassemia, reduce the systemic manifestation, and may help to prevent some complication in other diseases with ineffective erythropoiesis, like MDS or sickle cell disease. And as I showed you before, because of the high level of ROS which induce GDF11 expression, reducing fast ligand expression, we found that in some tumoral cells, you have the same mechanism of action. You have a ROS generation, and you have a GDF11 expression and low fast ligand expression, which induce drug resistance in patients, for example, with leukemia. And we can restore sensitivity by blocking GDF11. So I will finish to acknowledge people from my lab and a lot of collaborators. And here it's one of the pictures of the lab. Okay, thank you very much.